Hello. So if you're watching this video, then you were very probably at the Autism Partnership Board launch event earlier today. I'm so sorry about the technical complications and appreciated your patience so much, and really enjoyed getting to speak with the people on the table who put up with me being a head in a jar. So thank you very much. I'm going to go through this presentation again for those of you who couldn't follow it. But I'll try not to repeat stuff too much. So I have a few different hats. I'm autistic myself. I'm a social policy research fellow at the University of Brighton. I'm a volunteer with Boing Boing, who I know have worked closely with Head Start in Blackpool, so some of you will be familiar with. And I'm also an associate with the National Development Team for Inclusion, who are a not-for-profit social change organisation. And I'll refer to them as NDTI throughout the rest of the talk. And in this presentation, I'll be talking about the learning from a project about autistic young people's sensory needs in inpatient mental health hospitals, the importance of getting it right, and how this can be applied to the Blackpol Ambition for autistic people. So the learning from this talk comes from a report written by some of us at the NDTI called It's Not Rocket Science, Considering and Meeting the Sensory Needs of Autistic Children and Young People in Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, Inpatient Services. And the artwork here is from one of the young people involved in the project. So there's not really time in this talk to explain the full background to the project, but the important bits that you need to know are just that there were a group of autistic experts by experience who were going into mental health inpatient hospitals to support autistic people and people with learning disabilities who were in there on long-term stays to help evaluate their care and treatment. And for those of you who know what they are, this was for care and treatment reviews. So these autistic experts by experience who were supported by NDTI were really struggling to get into a lot of these hospital premises because of the sensory challenges that they were experiencing, and we'll cover what they are in the next few slides. So this report was commissioned by NHS England in the Southwest region originally, or the research was commissioned by them to look at the experiences of autistic people living long-term in hospitals and long stay units, because if it was challenging for the experts by experience to come just for a few hours, then what was it like for people who lived there or were there for a long time? And there's a link, there's a QR code here you can scan to get to the report, or the website is below. I'm going to share, along with this video, a document with links to all the resources included in this presentation, so don't worry about that. Okay, so sensory experiences are a really crucial part of this talk and the learning that I'm sharing. So just a quick overview of what that means. The number of autistic people that experience sensory differences is so large that it's now been added as part of the diagnostic criteria for autism. And what this means is that autistic people can be hyper or hyposensitive, so they can have increased sensitivity or decreased sensitivity in any of the external senses that we're probably all familiar with, so hearing, sight, smell, taste, and touch. But this also is the case for internal senses, which you might be less familiar with. The names aren't so important. The first one is interoception, and that relates to things like knowing if you're hungry or thirsty or sad or angry, or if you need the toilet. So it's understanding your internal feelings inside your body. Proprioception is knowing where your body is in space. And vestibular sense, so that's your balance. And while many autistic people have these sensory differences, they might not be aware of it as a thing that they know about, and particularly not in a given moment. They might not notice that actually they're becoming overwhelmed by noise, or that they haven't noticed if they're hungry for the last 15 hours. They just might not realise. Some people do, some people don't. And not all of the senses will be affected in the same way. So it's really common for an autistic person to, for example, be hypersensitive, have heightened sensitivity in their hearing, but perhaps low sensitivity or undersensitivity when it comes to taste. So they can't taste many different things, and they need really strong flavours in their food to notice. So increased sensitivity to some sensory information, combined with slower processing times and a greater attention to detail, can mean that autistic people can often become overwhelmed in their environments, and facing a kind of barrage of sensory information that stacks up without enough time to process it, and it just kind of backs up. This can lead to distress behaviours, so meltdowns, which in children are often mislabelled as tantrums, and in adults can be interpreted as aggressive behaviours or are sometimes self-injurious, or shutdowns, which are an extreme state of physical and communication withdrawal. If you're not somebody who has experienced sensory distress, then there's a really great video you can watch, a short animation, which just gives an artistic portrayal of it. I think that's really useful. And again, the link is there. So the importance of getting it right. The Care Quality Commission wrote a report last year investigating high levels of restraint, seclusion and segregation in long-stay mental health facilities. So they said that being placed in an inappropriate environment can be damaging and creates a pattern of distress, restraint and seclusion which can often not be broken. In many cases, we found that the impact of the environment on people, such as noise, heating and lights of the wards, had not been considered. In many cases, staff did not understand people's individual needs and the distress that being in the wrong environment could cause, particularly for those with sensory needs. This could lead to people expressing their distress in a way that others find challenging, leading to staff resorting to using restrictive practices. So while this is specifically addressing the cycle of restraint and seclusion in mental health inpatient hospitals, I think this learning is really relevant across all sectors around the city. By reducing the stress load on an autistic person's sensory system, they can cope better and they can thrive. And the Care Quality Commission also acknowledged this later in the report. They said people often ended up in hospital because they did not have the right support early on in the community at the time that they and their families needed it. And this was particularly so for people who were diagnosed as autistic. So the It's Not Rocket Science report includes lots of detailed recommendations in relation to the different senses, with examples of accommodations that could be made and for best practice, many of which have been trialled in cooperating hospitals. But today I'm just giving you the top 10 recommendations that have been built into something called the Sensory Friendly Wards Initiative. And again, these are specifically around hospital settings, but as we will hopefully see before the end of the talk, they can be applied in most of them can be applied in lots of different settings as well. So number one, create a predictable environment. Let people know what to expect, who to expect and when. Offer accurate and timely information to create more certainty and a feeling of safety. And the event today did a really great job of that by providing the information up front, letting people know what to expect with the pictures of where to go and the agenda. Involve autistic people with relevant expertise in reviewing the sensory environment in a meaningful way. Ensure all staff have training from autistic experts and allies that understand autism and sensory needs. And in hospital setting, we've said that includes the full multidisciplinary team, including healthcare staff, the ward team, facilities staff, educators, cooks, cleaners, agency staff, anyone that will be interacting with the autistic inpatients. Number 4, assess everyone's sensory need on admission. And as part of care planning, support people to do things that help them to self-regulate. So someone earlier, one of the speakers earlier in the event today, spoke about the importance of hobbies and special interests. So allowing people to do those things and encouraging the repeated movements that often get called stimming that autistic people do to self-regulate. Number 5, personalise risk management decision making. Support people to have choice and control and avoid blanket bans that affect everyone. So personalising the care planning. Swap alarms for silent alarms. This will significantly reduce the noise and the related distress that can cause. And staff do need to be alerted, but they don't necessarily need to be alarmed. Number 7, reduce noise and echo, and importantly consider background noises, so things like roads, heating, extractor fans, voices, TV. Change all fluorescent lighting for alternatives. Lighting can be really problematic for a lot of autistic people with sensory sensitivities. We recommend halogen is the best option, but if that's not possible, then high quality LED that crucially doesn't flicker or hum. Consider the impact of smells. So these include smells from people's perfumes, from food, from cleaning products, laundry products. And consider the impact of touch and texture, because hypo and hypersensitivities might mean that some people may be more or less sensitive to physical contact and knowing whether they're being touched or not. So many of these top 10 recommendations can be transferred into other environments, but I just wanted to touch on a few key areas that might be part of the Blackpol Ambition for autism, for autistic people. And the key advice across all sectors is to work with autistic people to review and assess services. And it was really great to see that that was a key and consistent message throughout the event today that we've all been talking about and all identified. So in hospital and healthcare settings, adopting the targeted suggestions from the It's Not Rocket Science report is a really great place to start. For outpatient services and GP surgeries, providing quiet rooms where possible in waiting areas can be really beneficial. In educational settings, many of the recommendations from the report can be transferred into school settings. I recommend thinking in particular about canteen spaces and meal times. We've found that canteen spaces can be some of the most challenging areas. They're particularly noisy, with lots of strong food smells, there's clatter, talking, lots of people in a close space together, mouth sounds from chewing. So providing space and quiet to eat is really beneficial, particularly when we remember that there's a high co-occurrence of eating disorders and disordered eating among autistic individuals. Consider calming spaces that young people can remove themselves to if they're becoming overwhelmed. And this will really promote autonomy and self-regulation, which might prevent escalation and meltdowns or distress behaviours, and also helps autistic children learn to manage their own difficulties as well. There's a really great free 8-page booklet based on some research co-produced with autistic female school non-attenders that reflect on the things that made school really challenging for them and some suggestions for how to make it easier and improve that, which I think is a really great resource for those of you working in educational settings. Okay, in terms of policing, top recommendation would be training and awareness raising for all staff around autistic distress behaviours, including the approved mental health professionals. I was contacted by the head of the AMHP training at the University of Brighton, who wanted to develop some additional training, because the feedback he was getting was that the AMHPs were often recommending that autistic people in distress be sectioned, but they weren't sure if this was right. And often that won't be appropriate or necessary, but they weren't really sure how to interpret those behaviours, didn't understand why they were occurring, and they're easily misunderstood, particularly them appearing aggressive as well. Improving sensory environments of interview and holding facilities. And the National Police Autism Association is a really great resource. It's run by autistic police professionals, and it's free, and I really recommend taking a look at that if this is the area that you're involved in. Community settings, making public spaces and public transport accessible, like for today's event. So normalising sending out detailed information with visual aids before an event, along with maps and easy directions, providing a dress code. All of that has been really positive. Excuse me. I wondered if it might be possible to combine or draw on the resources of the Blackpool City of Learning for community awareness raising, and build on the existing success of the whole town approach to resilience, because there are these networks you already have in place that run right through the community to educate people about resilience and resilient moves, and I wonder if that could be utilised to help improve understanding of the needs of autistic people, which is one of the targets of the autism strategy that you're working with. So, commerce and business and employment. The National Autistic Society piloted a quiet hour in shops pre-pandemic. Some autistic people found that useful, and it might be an option or an idea to consider introducing that around our city. Think about making spaces accessible. So again, things like background noise, bright lights, reducing fluorescent lights and strip lighting. Offering job trials rather than interviews. And I think it was Peter who spoke in the first part of the morning, who highlighted the fact that the job market isn't particularly autism friendly, and often autistic people don't fare very well in interviews because the skills you need for an interview are often not the skills that you need for the job. So some researchers found that job trials are a lot more supportive and help autistic people find jobs and thrive in them. And offering flexible working and home working as well. So finally, adult social care services. If we can support autistic people to flourish and thrive in their every day-to-day lives, then they'll not only be happier and better off, but there'll be decreased demand on acute services. And this refers back to the Care Quality Commission report that I shared earlier. So an example from my own life, a few years ago, I had a bit of a physical health crisis, and as a result, my autistic challenges were kind of heightened, and my daily functioning ability was really impaired. I felt more disabled by being autistic than I usually do, and I approached social services for some support, and I was allocated a budget and agreed that I could have some support, but the local authority couldn't find any suitable provider for the kind of support I needed as someone that was living independently, and the only option for me was to recruit and interview and pay for a private PA funded by the local authority budget. But at the time, I didn't have the ability to manage that kind of thing without the support. So I just fell through the cracks, and it's all worked out okay for me. But recently I lost an autistic friend due to lack of support from services, and unfortunately that's not so uncommon. So it's really important to get these things right and help autistic people thrive. So suggestions include third sector community support groups, which can provide opportunities for socialising for those who find it difficult, or managing and accessing benefits and advocacy. And an inquiry last year, led by the Westminster Commission on Autism along with the University of Bath, included as a key recommendation the provision and funding of peer support, acknowledging the benefits of learning from others with similar experiences. So the take-home message: if we're serious about enabling thriving and autistic lives, we must be serious about the sensory needs of autistic people in every setting. The benefits of this will extend well beyond the autistic community, because what helps autistic people will often help everyone else as well. So here are a couple of the reports, but I will share those in the link with my contact details, and hopefully see you at the Resilience Revolution conference at the end of March, and at the spring conference around the Blackpol Ambition for Autistic People. Thank you so much. Bye.